Call to order the November 6, 2019 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Roll call.
Becker.
Present.
Buckley. Castro.
Here.
Klein.
Yes.
Maxwell.
Here.
Wright. Chair Doe.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Approval of the agenda. Any additions or deletions? And if none, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
So
Second.
moved by Maxwell, second by Castro. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We do not have minutes to approve, so we'll move on to the public participation portion. This is time where the public can comment or ask questions on anything that is not part of our agenda. So if there's anyone that would like to come to the podium, you're welcome to. And there being none, we will move to new business. Oh,
As I do not have an agenda, I don't know what's on it.
Oh.
I don't know why I'm here would be part of it or not, and when I talk about the proposed sign.
okay. Yep. So that's what we're going to start with, actually. Yep, no problem. Thank you for asking. So our new business, we start tonight with a public hearing. Excuse me. A petition by Aurora Sign Company representing DeKalb Community School District Number 428 for approval of a special use permit to allow an electronic changeable copy sign, in parenthesis digital display sign, as shown on the sign detail made part of the special use application. The subject site is located at 650 North First Street, in parenthesis Clinton Rosette Middle School. So I open to the petitioners first. And if you can state your name and address, we would appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Brandon Weiss with the Aurora Sign Company, 1100 Route 34, Aurora, Illinois, 60503. And I'm here on behalf of the Clinton Rosette School. First things first, on behalf of the school, I'd like to state that the effort in providing the new sign out in front of the school is intended to be very respectful of its surroundings and very respectful of the community as a whole. The new sign will be placed in the same location as the existing sign. I'm going to kind of turn that a little bit. Same location as the existing sign. We will be respecting the landscape requirements for the sign. It will be changed slightly, I believe. We can talk more about that in a little bit. It will be a double-faced sign, meaning it will be set perpendicular to the street in the same manner that the existing sign is, so there'll be no change to that. This is the look of the sign, and you can see that we've designed a sign that one is functional and two is very legible. The intention of the sign with respect to the community is to expand the idea of communication with passersby. Schools in general always have the communication challenge with any of their parents, and the goal of any community is to get more folks involved in any school, anything, talking fun fairs, market day, those types of things. The sign was designed with respect to the current ordinance. There is a special use concern here, but there's precedents set for approvals of special use concerns in this area. I think the most notable item of concern on the sign is the use of the electronic message center. One thing I'll say to that is that the existing sign is illuminated, and the use of the new electronic message center, although is an LED screen, does have auto dimming capabilities. The sign is smart and knows when it's night and knows when it's day, so it's able to correct itself depending on a cloudy day, a pitch black at night, or on during the day. It also has the functionality to control its on-off capabilities via programming, whereas the existing sign now is simply a timer. So the new sign can be controlled from inside, and you can tell it to turn off or on any time of day. There's a closer zoom at this sign. Going back to the allowable square footage, we're under the height, and we're under this, the allowable ordinance, we're under the height and under the square footage allowed, and all ratios are respected as well. We did add a little bit of height here via conversation about snow plow concerns. Landscaping will not affect any of this. I don't think we're gonna have any landscaping that's gonna be taller than blocking any of the copy on the sign or the electronic message center. But the snow plows passing at a pretty high rate of speed is always a concern in this part of the country. Here's the overhead view showing the 20-foot setback is going to be respected per standard ordinance. And then as far as residential is always a concern in any, with any elementary or high school, junior high, college. In this case, we're about 400 feet away from any residential areas, and the sign does not face those residential areas either. This is the existing sign that, again, I'd just like to point out is also internally illuminated and does not have auto-dimming capabilities. This is a photo of the road. Is this across the street? Right across the street, right? Okay, so with that said, that's the basic premise of our ask this evening. Can I answer any questions?
So we will hear from the city. We'll open up for any public questions or comments, and then if we have any further questions, then we'll bring you back up.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I open to the city.
Thank you, Chair. You have a staff report in your packets. Can you hear me?
No,
Jeremy, can you get the mic?
there we go.
It's okay now? Okay. You have a staff report in your packet. As the applicant mentioned,
Can you bring Dan's mic up a little bit more? Sorry. It sounded like it kicked on, but there we go.
the UDO allows prohibits the, can you hear me?
Barely. He said it's already maxed.
Can you hear me? Yeah, that's
There.
better.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. The UDO prohibits digital display signs, electronic changeable copy signs, except for time and temperature. So a waiver or variance to the UDO is allowed for signs if it is goes through a special use permit or a planned development. So they've applied for a special use permit to allow the sign as shown. So we do have restrictions for height and size for churches, schools, and public buildings of 15 feet in height and 50 square feet, which they do meet. The digital display portion will be about 50% of the total sign area, as you can see in the detail, about 25 square feet. It's going to replace the existing sign, as noted, that's out there along First Street. With the special use that's going to be required for the school. There's a couple of special uses already approved for this site back in the early 2000s for a mobile classroom and an addition, so there's been special use permits approved for the site in the past. And if you recall, in the last couple of years, most of you have seen a couple of these requests come through for digital display signs. Back in July of 2018, we did have a request from Little John Elementary School, and a special use permit was issued for a digital display sign about 7 foot in height, 50 square feet, that was in there, right in front of the building in their parking lot turnaround. And also, most recently, in 2018, about a year ago, Hillcrest Covenant Church on North First Street received a special use permit also from the city for a digital display sign. It was part of their ground sign there, about 30 square feet and 5 feet in height. Both of those locations in a previous car dealer, we've approved pretty much similar conditions with these, and they're listed in the report, and we're recommending these be approved with this application also. So they're listed there, about half a dozen. The first one is the display must be static in nature, not have any movement or transitions. The big one too is the messages cannot change any quicker than 20 seconds. So this will not be a flashing sign. They have to show a message, and it have to be 20 seconds before they can change to another message. There's also, the sign must include light sensors, dimmer controls, which I think the applicant mentioned the sign will have. So it will dim down once on a cloudy day or at night. There can no be any off-site advertising on the sign except for government messages. and must have an automatic shut-off switch if the sign is malfunctioning. So these conditions, which are recommended, we did approve with the other two also. With Little John Elementary School, we did have additional condition about that the sign must be turned off if there's nothing going on in the school, if the school is over with, or there's some activity going on in the building. If there's none of those two going on, then it must be shut off. So not recommending it for this location. With the Little John Elementary School, if you recall, that sign was very close to several homes there, about 25, 50 feet to the backyard of a couple houses there. So not recommended for here. In addition, as shown here, the nearest single-family home is about 400 feet away from the proposed sign location as shown here. There's an apartment complex on the other side of First Street that's about 240 feet away. That was the last slide, shows that from the First Street. It's pretty heavily screened, so. Also, we've approved in the past with a little different conditions than the last three. DeKalb High School has a special use permit for electronic reader board sign. That was constructed in 2009. First Midwest Bank and 130 West Lincoln in 2012 had approval. And then Toyota of DeKalb or Bemis Toyota in 2016 also has a special use permit. We have the standards for special use, findings of fact. Staff believes that the proposed sign is compatible with the ordinance, with the surrounding area. Just 50% of the sign will be digital display. The school district's intending to portray messages to the community and students and residents and parents. It's on a busier highway, so they're meeting the height and size requirements. They're going to comply and agree to comply with these operational conditions we've approved with the other digital display signs. We did get a couple of citizen response forms, and they're in your packet. We did receive an email from Peter and Florence Gerlach at 218 Sycamore Road, and a citizen response form from Beverly Joan Watson of 821 North 5th Street objecting to the proposal. Also received a response form from Jonathan and Jennifer Lowe at 206 Sycamore Road, had questions and comments regarding the lighting and the size of the sign. I think those are answered or addressed by the operational conditions that we're recommending. Also received a form in support of the sign from Carrie Nelson of 216 North 1st Street. She owns property at 719 North 4th Street. So copies of those are in your packet. So staff would recommend approval. We think it meets the special use standards. It will inform the public of the school operations and related activities and announcements, so it does serve a public interest. There's a sample motion prepared that recommends approval with the details shown, the sign detail and the sign location. That's part of the approval and exhibits, and those 6 operational conditions that we've approved in those other locations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I now open up to anyone in the public that wish to speak or ask questions. If so, come to the podium. If you can state your name and address, please.
My name's Peter Gerlach. I live at 218 Sycamore Road. You have apparently copies of my email in your packet, so you know some of what I'm going to say. I think this sign should not be approved. I think the fact that other ones have been approved, I mean, approving a bad idea once doesn't make approving it again a good idea. Mr. Weiss did a good job of explaining what it was, but I heard nothing that would explain why it should be done. As far as relaying information about the school, it's a very inefficient way to do it. Obviously, I haven't done studies on it, but I feel safe saying that the majority of the people driving by this sign in the day do not have a connection with Clinton Rosette. And I think it's likely that a goodly number of the people who do are not going to be driving by it. There are much better ways to get the information to the parents and students. The light pollution issue, I think, is serious, both for what it does to wildlife and what it does to people. The way people drive near Clinton Rosette is a hazard anyway. A changing sign would be much more of a distraction than a static one. That is not something that's needed there. And I really, really, really do not need an electric sign glowing in my front window 24 hours a day. I would ask you, please deny this permit.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak or have questions? Okay, we'll give another opportunity in a moment. And so now I want to open to the commissioner. So I'll start down with Mr. Maxwell.
I did have a question on the auto dimming. You had mentioned that it can be adjusted for day and night, but does it work similar to a rheostat switch in the sense that there's two options, or it can be adjusted accordingly?
Yeah,
Yes,
please.
if you would, please.
The question was basically, how is the auto dimming feature controlled? There is a sensor on both faces of the sign that senses the light density, and it will control itself. You can override that and tell it to just be in full brightness all the time, or standard working conditions is that it will sense the brilliancy of the day and adjust accordingly on its own.
Okay. And I guess at the lower setting then, I mean, I'm guessing it's judged in lumens, or how, I mean, what kind of intensity are you talking at night? I
We
mean,
can go per the condition of the UAD, sorry. Per the condition of the UDO, we cannot be any brighter than 500 NITs.
Okay. That's the only question I had. Thank you.
Is this sign going to be lit up 24 hours a day?
I don't think there's a condition in the UDO to address that, but every school district is different, and every location of a school is different, and who they're communicating with and how they're communicating. So it can be set per any condition set forth.
But normally, I mean, the speaker said he was complaining about, or concerned about, light 24 hours a day.
That will not be the case if it's controlled to not be on 24 hours a day. The school can control the sign to, say, turn it off at 11 o'clock at night or midnight to 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. They have that capability.
Do you know if the school had received complaints about the other sign being inadequate?
I'm not privy to that information. I don't know that for sure,
Do you
but
wanna-
I don't think so.
Do you want to answer? Yeah, you can come up.
My name is Tammy Carson. I'm a Director of Facilities for DeKalb School District. We haven't had any complaints from citizens in regards to the light coming off of that sign. We have had, the reason we ended up looking at replacing this sign is because it is damaged inside the current sign, and the slats that hold the letters in place do not hold them very well any longer. So we were at a point of having to either put money into repairing that and putting the slats and making it more usable so we can continue to use it as a message board, or looking at replacing it. And so that's where we opted for the replacement.
So the sign would not be on at night, or it would be?
That decision really hadn't been made at this point, Mr. Klein. What we I would say is the current sign is on all night. It comes on at a specific time with our parking lot lights, and it does stay on through the entire night until the morning. My understanding with the new sign is the new sign would not illuminate at any higher level than the current sign does. So it wouldn't be any longer or on or brighter any longer than the current sign is.
So I
Even
didn't
if it was
realize
on
the
all
current
night.
sign does light up at night?
It does. The sign lights up at night, it comes on a timer system and stays on until the morning when the sun comes up, and then we adjust the timers as needed based on daylight savings time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So what I'm hearing so far is that there is an open door for a dialogue about turning this off at some point at night, and that is a good thing. The second question I had, following up on what Mr. Maxwell was asking, this system has some programming associated with it. What is the default if the sensor stops working? The light sensor stops working. What is the default?
The sign will not turn off on its own if the light sensor stops working. someone would have to notice that the sign was too bright. So a default for the sign turning off does not exist. And there is not a default for this type of product in the industry that exists to turn itself off.
To that point, though, what's the failure rate of the sensors?
We have never replaced one. And when I say never, the technology in the late 90s started leaning more towards LEDs. The technology prior to that was a xenon-filled incandescent bulb. And that technology was service calls constantly. Now everybody knows the world of the LED these days. So we've never replaced one. We've never seen it happen.
Thank you.
Do you happen to know whether the sensor is an LED-based technology?
Yes.
It is a LED-based technology, the sensor.
Correct. I'm just gonna.
We
hang on.
need a computer programmer to fix this. I mean, this is fixable.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure. And this unit is manufactured by a company called Watchfire. There are two units globally that are kind of the most respected, Watchfire and Daktronics. Daktronics you see like over at Northern Illinois University, and their massive Jumbotron. Watchfire's, their business model is more geared toward the single user. It's more geared toward banks. It's more geared toward schools and car dealerships, sort of end user type things, not major soldier fields. And the computer programming that goes into these things and the IT, I mean, it's abysmal because they're dealing mainly, their main customers are banks. So they have to know that you can't get into their technology, you can't crack firewalls, you can't hack into them, things of that nature. So it's a quality technology because it's basically just a computer outside.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm asking a couple questions for clarification. The first one is confirming you said it's LED technology. The old sign, the one that you're replacing, was that also LED?
That was fluorescent tubes,
So I'm assuming then this new technology will be more energy efficient.
incredibly more energy efficient.
Secondly, you said that the old sign, that the nit usage is the same for this as it was the old, maximizing at 500?
The existing sign actually might be a little brighter. This one's going to be not allowed to be any higher than 500, and that's controllable. That's their dimmer. That's the lower part of their dim.
So will it face, as it's being set, will it face in the same direction that the current sign
Yes,
is facing?
perpendicular to the road.
So Mr. Gerlach's concerned that it would impact his being able to sleep at night, I'm assuming, or not having light imposed upon him.
I don't know.
You should not do that, is what you're saying.
The light casting that far is farther than 400 feet is unlikely.
Okay. And then the last question I have is the decision to turn the lights on or off, to dim them, to brighten them, is that going to be at the discretion of the school itself then? They will make that decision? I'm assuming they also will change out the message, I'm assuming?
And we also have the ability to kind of regulate that too.
Okay.
Right,
But Tammy can answer.
based on how today ends in regards to the recommendation or what the approval stipulations are, is typically how we would be setting the sign. It is controlled by the main office at Clinton Rosette through a wireless system.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Tammy, I have a question
Okay. I'll make sure you
for the
make sure
school.
you-
And if I may have read this too fast, is the hope that, and I know we have a little say in this, colored, what is your hope for how the sign looks? The display that you're,
In regards to the lettering,
and, yes, yeah.
I am going to defer to what we actually ended up deciding in regards to, is it that the lettering does change colors, or is it a solid?
Like the amber color or?
No, it is a colored EMC, so it would have
Color capability.
color to it, but it doesn't mean that it's flashing, moving, changing. It can be a blue letter if that's what
The letters,
Okay.
that's what we did at Little John. The letters can be chosen to be different colors by the programming in the main office, but again, it's not the changing.
So, excuse me, so the slide that's up actually shows like a colored background versus the letters being colored. Is that just for show on here, or are you hoping to have something in the back where there is like a picture and
That is
multiple colors?
That is a static image of capability of this unit.
Okay.
So that you could put an American flag there, you could put a photo of a child there that just won an award, if someone's birthday, it does have that
As
capability.
part of kind of the change out every 20 seconds?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Gerlach.
Yeah.
Is the present sign that's there now ever disturb you?
I would be happier if it weren't lit up all night, yes.
Well, I'm not asking for degrees of happiness. Has it disturbed you in the past? Have you been bothered by the present
My
sign?
house is too bright, yes. And if I
Could you,
So maybe this one would be an improvement.
wait. Can you come back to the podium, please? We have public that can hear that, and we need them to be able to hear.
Do you
Okay.
think you'll be worse off with the new one then?
I don't believe the current one is that much taller than I would be. It's going to be a lot more obvious.
But the sign will be, but will the lighting, you think, be more disturbing than
If
the
it's bigger,
present
yeah,
sign?
it will be. And to tie that into Mr. Becker's question, could you put up the one with the yellow arrow on it? Sure. As to where it is in relation to my house? My house is right there. It's facing that way, so it's going to be almost parallel with my bedroom window.
But correct me if I'm wrong, the new sign will not emit any more light than the existing one at night, correct?
But the existing one is, what, about that high?
Existing one's about 10 feet. This will
10
be
feet.
just under 13 feet.
Okay,
Or
so it's
15
it's
feet.
not as going to be as much taller as it looked like it would be there, but also, the existing one, while as I said, I don't like it lit up, it is static. If you give something a light, an audible tone, anything continuous, it will fade out of your consciousness. Changing every 20 seconds, it doesn't have that opportunity to do that. If I could make a suggestion, replacing the faulty, I believe they said the lights were faulty in the new one, replacing them with LED strips would seem more efficient, because it's going to cost money to build this as well as to run it, and I think that money would be better spent paying teachers myself.
I have a question.
Yep.
Could I have somebody from the school just answering, what is the likelihood on the school year that on any given day you have an event that goes after 9:30 or 10 at night?
If you can state your name and address, please.
Yeah. Brant Boyer, 502 West Dresser Road, DeKalb, Illinois, principal at Clinton Rosette. Did you say after 9:30, 10 o'clock?
9:30, 10 o'clock, after that time, what are the chances of having any event whatsoever in the school?
Very nil. We don't. I can't think of one thing that goes after 10
Yeah,
o'clock.
I
for
can,
sure.
I can only imagine the science fair, which goes a little bit close to that time.
Right.
I mean, the reason I bring that up is because most of I suspect, I'm going to hypothesize that most of the intended audience is probably those parents dropping kids off or picking them up. And those are things that don't happen, that basically happen very early in the morning or sometime in the middle of the afternoon. And then there are events in the evenings where, school meetings and stuff like that. So I suspect that there is some space here to have some agreement where the sign is not lit after a certain time at night and is lit sometime in the morning. And it might help both sides of the situation here. A suggestion.
I tend to agree.
think we're good. We'll have you come up if we have any further questions.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to give one more opportunity for the public before I close the public hearing. If you have any further questions or comments, go ahead.
I will say that if it could be turned off, as Mr. Castro suggested, that would make it much more palatable. I mean, yes, there are times at night when the parking lot's full of cars. It's not going to make any difference then. So if, as he suggested, if there's not something going on at the school, it'd be turned off at night, then I would not have a problem with it, other than spending the money on it for the, that could be spent other places in the school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
I don't at all disagree with being able to turn it off at a certain time of night, but I do think we need to keep in mind the audience that can be beyond just our student population and our parents. Because it is on First Street, there is traffic coming through that we could hit from a community perspective that I would like to be considered by the council, by the committee. When we did Little John, it's in the middle of a parking lot, so the only people that would see it are the ones that are attending events in the parking lot, and that was one of the reasons we opted to turn it off at the time when we said when school events were ending. So I would just ask that a consideration be given to part of this is in regards to the traffic that is going by the school and not just the population that's coming into the school for events.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? There being none, I'm closing the public hearing. Any further questions, comments, and now into discussion with the commissioners? Mr. Becker, do you have anything?
Only that, in my opinion, I was always raised that nothing good happens after midnight. So I don't think that I have an issue if we were to recommend that it be dimmed, at least in the very least, to be dimmed to a minimal amount after 10, say 10 p.m. and not before 6 a.m. That seems like it might meet Mr. Gerlach's need, and at the same time allow for an advancement to the LED technology, which would allow for very quick, you know, if something comes out that they need to put quick notification out to the public, they can. So I guess more than a question, that's my statement on it.
My turn. With this and many other cases, my driving principle is compromise. And I think we have an opportunity here for compromise, whether it is dimmed to the very minimum or completely turned off after about 7, listen to me, 10, I'm sorry for that. After
Right now, it'd be
Apparently nothing good happens after 7 either.
Yeah, well, I go to sleep early. After 10 approximately and on at 6 in the morning seems reasonable to me. I think there is some room for compromise here, and I would strongly prefer for there to be a dialogue on what is the best situation, as opposed to any of us or this committee making recommendations to the council imposing any specific times. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Of course, I go to bed at 8 o'clock, so maybe you could dim it a little earlier, but most people, I think, go to bed later than that. So I think that would help. I'm not convinced that this sign will be any worse for you than the other one. So, but dimming it or turning it off later in the evening would be helpful.
Or off would be better.
I agree.
Mr. Maxwell?
I understand your position about the amount of traffic that flows down First Street and the ability to actually announce multitudes of messages that are easy to get out. I do think it's a good compromise to dim it perhaps so that it's visible, but certainly not to the level that it would be at even up until 10 o'clock at night. Again, I don't think that we're the ones that could even judge that, but I don't know that it's necessary to turn it off completely, but drop it. Yeah, that certainly sounds like a reasonable request, and I don't think anybody's going to be reading it past 10 flying down First Street. So 6 o'clock in the morning, again, seemed a little late to me because I know a lot of people get up and start traveling at 5:30, but again, not for me to judge, but I think that is a reasonable compromise for both sides.
So I have a question, and I'm sorry, sir, I forgot your last name.
Random Weiss.
Sorry. So if we were to recommend to dim it down, say after 10 p.m., how far down would you dim it so that it still is readable without, so it's still readable?
It's really comes down to the function of the area. Because if there are lots of street lights in that area, that level of dimness or brilliancy is going to change. The 500 nits is the standard for that DeKalb has set, that it can be no brighter than. In this case, we're just kind of going to have to play with it to see where our level of dimness is going to be. But to put a number on that today and know what the legibility factor is going to be, and then figure out the factors of that equation, legible from where, legible how, at what speed of travel, and from what distance, I don't know that we could rightfully answer the question today.
Okay.
Chair,
So-
could I have a suggestion on the, probably in terms of enforcement? I know we talked about dimming after a certain time, so unless there's some specific number that can be given, we got to make sure this can be enforced. So it's got to be clear on what the motion is. So it's probably better to have time to turn off, so it's very clear what is occurring. If you want to dim it after a certain time, the language has got to be clear, so as a city, we know if they're complying or not.
Sure.
So just keep that in mind with the
Okay.
motion.
Thank you. So another question that I have is, given the auto dimming and brightening function, so the sign appears, if I'm looking at this correctly, and I think I am in my mind as well, it appears that the sign's going to be between two streetlights. So what type of impact may those streetlights have on the auto dimming function at night?
They can, because it is based on the surrounding area. So if you have a light right over your sign, it is telling the sign that it is brighter out.
That it's bright out.
Yeah. Which is why it has an override function and it can be programmed.
So what is the,
And I will add to that most signs in most cases do have streetlights near them.
true. So what is the circumference of the area? And maybe maybe you won't be able to answer this.
I think it's above
And-
my pay grade.
And I'm
'Cause I think I know
thinking
you-
it might be more the streetlight that I'm thinking of than the sign. But is there a certain circumference from the sign that is detectable with the lights? So let's say where the sign is at the setback is 20 feet. And you've got your streetlights then coming down at that 20-foot mark. Is the sign going to pick up that that's a bright light there?
The sign is only going to pick up what the light is at the sensor.
Okay, so closer to the sign.
Yep.
If I'm driving by and I have my brights on, and it hits that sign,
It's not
going to trigger.
that quick to respond.
Okay.
Yeah, it does have a relay on it.
Okay,
Otherwise, that would be happening everywhere.
right,
Yeah.
right. I needed to ask
Sure. No,
because
fair
of that
question.
auto dimming piece. Okay.
And I would be the one flashing my brights just to make it happen.
And I would be the one that forgot I have my brights on, so. And I'd have him flashing brights at me. Okay, I think that answered my question then as well.
Sure.
So, any further questions or comments from the commissioners at this moment? Okay. So as you're thinking through what we want to do, I do want to reiterate what Mr. Olson said, that we need to consider clear and distinct guidelines that we're going to give when you come up with your motion. And I think we do need to take in consideration, as we have with the others, that we've given some timeline of either dimming or shutting off the light. As has been said, the Little John one is off because it is in a residential area. Where when we had the Hillcrest Covenant, I don't believe we
There's
had
no
that
time
one
restrictions
cut
on that.
off.
Yeah.
Right.
It was
because
discussed, but
wasn't-
it was not approved
Right.
that way, yeah.
Right. And what we recommend to the council, they can override or, yes.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I just want to make that clear. So any further discussion and,
Well, it seems to me, I would think if they have events in the evening, the sign would not be turned off until after the event. So to put a
right,
specific time, I think, might not be practical simply because it may not apply in every situation. Some events, they have a music contest or something that's going to last later, and wouldn't want the sign off until after that, I would
I
think.
think it's
So,
important too, what's brought up a few times is the location of this on First Street, heavily trafficked roadways. Little John Elementary School, that's in a parking lot. Nobody's seeing that
Right.
except for people that are at the school. So
right.
this will advertise, community district events, throughout the night. And there's a lot of traffic going through there that are not, necessarily going to the school at all. So it's kind of important get the messages out and communicate to the public.
I do have one more question for the school district. So in the summertime, when there is no school, although I'm not sure if you have summer school at Clinton Rosette, obviously there are there's other stuff happening on your grounds during the summer. So is your hope that perhaps this would be utilized to advertise those other, so let's say the Kishwaukee Valley Football League, things like that. Is the hope to be that would be utilized as well for those events in conjunction with anything with the school or?
The one thing I would say is that we haven't had that opportunity before with the current sign because it takes a person physically going out there and changing every letter.
Sure.
To have that opportunity would be great. I mean, we have served as the parking lot for events that go on at Elwood House throughout the summer and throughout the year. They will park in our parking lot, especially now that we have the one in the front. There can be many options now that we have the flexibility to literally just type it in and be able to advertise whatever is appropriate at that time and change it regularly if there's something. So the summer may or may not be as frequent because the school is not as busy in the summer, but we do have staff that are in that building 12 months a year, and every summer is a little different. DeKalb School District, I can say right now summer school's not there, but next year it could be.
Sure. And would you hope to have this, and I don't think we can regulate this, but it's just a question, would you hope to have the sign on during the summer regardless if
I
there
would
was
say
anything
yes.
going on?
I would say yes, but again, with a sensor, being that the sun is up so much later, obviously it wouldn't be illuminating as quickly. And
Sure. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to expand on that answer. There are many studies that we can provide data on if you guys request it that have proven on-site advertising, on-site communication is the most effective form of communication over any radio, television, flyers, social media ads. It's on-site advertising. The reason I say that is because it ties back to your question and my initial statement of this is all rooted in good. This is all rooted in community awareness and togetherness. This all comes from that. And we're seeing these types of electronic message centers pop up all over the country. One, because they are energy efficient now, and two, because they work. They bring people together, they spread the news. So I just wanted to expand on that answer.
I just wanted to comment too, I know we've been discussing that this is in relation to events, but if people are going to the school, they already were aware of it, so I don't think that events are nearly as important as it is just to consistently say at 10 o'clock it dims or at 10:30 it dims. I think the schedule just needs to be established, and I wouldn't predicate that by whether there's anybody in the school or not. I mean, obviously, if they're there for something, they're already aware of it, and so having it brighter or darker while they're, when they're leaving isn't going to make any difference.
the one thing that did come to mind, and again, it might not be pertaining to that event that's going on at that moment, but in the summer, for example, we have web training, and parents are not as up to date on what's going on at the school during the summer because they're just not as informed at that point, even though we might send emails and other blasts. and to let them know when the web training is, the first day of school, 6th grade back-to-school events. Those are great times, and I don't know if that parent will be going by at 10 o'clock at night and see it, or 10 o'clock in the morning, or whatever that is. So again, it's not necessarily the event that's going on at that moment, but it's to let them know, or if there's a half day or no school day coming up. Those are really, as you've probably seen around schools, those are some important things. And many a times I've heard parents go, I saw the sign at that school. Do we really have a half day next week? Oh yeah, we've blasted it out, and we've advertised it quite clearly, but it was that sign that they see when they're coming and going past the schools that's helped.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of the sign. I think it's a wonderful idea. Just, again, the timing is just going to have to be
Sure.
worked out.
Understood.
And
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? I'm ready for a motion if somebody would like to do one, unless you want to discuss a little more about timing or anything.
Is that something that could be established after the fact if we just make the motion?
Well, the motion should be clear of what, if you want it shut off at a certain time, or if it's going to be dimmed, it's got to be specific of how much measured. So it's got to be enforceable, in terms of the, whatever you're recommending.
So the challenge that we have, I think, in front of us is that at least some of us are in favor of having some kind of either shut off or dimming of this sign after a certain time at night and turning it on in the morning. The challenge that we have is that when it comes to measures, we have an idea that 1 foot is about this. But I have a hard time believing that we have an idea what 500 nits is, or 125.
Well, I'm basing that, again, on the fact that they said that it wouldn't irradiate any more light than the existing sign.
So that's 500.
I
So
would
that's the
assume-
highest.
Yeah, and so
So the question is, would you
effectively, we're
recommend-
not doing anything that's changing what's existing now.
Correct.
So-
Correct. So if you dim it at night, what would that number be? And I think, I'm
Well,
trying
he
to
said back
answer.
to what the existing sign is now.
The existing sign is no more than 500 if it is conforming to the UDO.
Yes.
And I
No.
assume that is the highest
No.
the highest radiance you're going to get out of the current one. Is that
I'm not sure the
correct?
light intensity now. They've testified that the proposed sign will be less intense than what's existing there now. The proposed standard is 500 nits for the new one, so I'm not sure what the intensity is of the existing.
Okay, we don't know anything about the current one.
I don't know what the
Okay.
intensity of it
Thank-
is. I know
thank you. I didn't
what
know
they're
that.
testified that the new one will be less intense than the existing. I don't know what the current one is.
Again, I go back to.
Do you know
the
how
point-
intense it? I don't.
No studies have been done.
I mean, obviously, it's livable if we've.
So I'm a little
lived with it
concerned
for
about
this long.
putting a time, this has got to be, as I mentioned, enforced, so I'm more concerned about dimming it, and it's got to be.
That's
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
The challenge is that it's easier for us to say, turn it off at 10, turn
Yeah.
it back on at 6 in the morning.
Yes, yeah,
It will be almost unenforceable for us to say 125 nits.
yeah.
I don't know what that is. If
I
it is
don't-
not legible, what?
To
who
measure
cares?
that, and, they can set the thing, but let's try and make this simple and
Yeah.
as much as
Correct.
possible, so
Correct.
we can enforce it. So turning it off is probably a reasonable time. It's probably the best way in
Correct.
terms of enforcement, if that's what you choose to do. I'm not recommending that because of it's a little different than Little John, where that's entirely in the parking lot. And that restriction was it had to be shut off when there's no activities going on in the school or that. So that's, nobody was seeing that because it's entirely in the parking lot. This is on heavily busy road, First Street, just like the church. We didn't put a time restriction on there. We discussed it, but determined that it would be okay to leave that on. So, and there's quite a bit of distance from the adjacent home here. And they testified they'll be less intense than the existing sign, but.
So it's really just the time that it needs to be established.
Yeah, if you want to set a time, that should be part of your motion. That's not in the sample. There's no time restriction in the sample motion.
Did you have a question?
No, I just, my thought is that while it's not set to be any worse than what the current sign is at night for the residents of the neighborhood around it, do we want to not to try to make it a little bit better for the residents? And in that case, if we were to set a timeline, even if it's 11 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning, that still eases the burden of having light cast into the lights of the residents. assuming that that's what's happening. I don't imagine Mr. Gerlach would be here if that wasn't a concern for him. I like the idea of the sign. I think, absolutely, I think it makes sense to have the sign. I personally think that at some point in time, does the relative effectiveness of the sign diminish against the value of having a peaceful night without light shining at, at your windows? So from my perspective, even if we went from 11 to 6, I would find that much more palatable than just promoting it
11 to 6 off.
off.
Thank you very much. I agree.
As far as the timing is concerned, I would say 5:30, and again, I say that only because I do believe that there's a significant amount of traffic of people coming and going in the morning, and that, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. I think a lot of people will have already passed it, so.
And in peak of summer, it gets light at 4 o'clock anyway, so
Mhm.
5:30, I think, probably isn't bad.
Am I allowed to ask a question or is that closed?
I'm sorry.
Am I allowed to ask another question of the group? Or is
Yeah.
that closed?
Yeah, you can, because it's part of our deliberation. So while you're coming up there, Tammy, just for the commission, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, so whatever you guys decide to put in here, it should go, make it number 7 in Exhibit
Yes.
B, correct? Okay.
I'm trying to understand from a standpoint of what I understand the Hillcrest Church sign, the difference in our sign compared to theirs. Because if theirs doesn't have a time restriction, school district being even more community-based than a specific church, why there would be a restriction on ours in regards to that timing? I just have that
I
question.
think it's as simple as were there complaints from the neighbors?
On the Hillcrest, that I don't know.
Yeah,
That's why I'm
I
asking to
were there?
understand that better.
Not the immediate neighbors, they were down
I
off of there a little bit.
don't, and forgive me, Mr. Gerlach, I don't know that I fully buy into light pollution and some of the other comments that you had. But I do buy into, because I lived under circumstances where at one point in time, I had lights that could not be overcome by blinds. And I do think that we need to measure, how we approach it so that, no, it may not be as bad, it may not be worse than what it is right now, but can we make it better? And it seems to me that if we were to modify the time allowed, even 11 to 5:30, that does provide some sensitivity to the needs of the neighborhood. Your principal indicated that nothing really ever happens after 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I do understand that there will be people driving down First Street, but I live off of First down in Riches Rivermist, so I'm part of the theater. I go up and down First Street all the time, and I can tell you, after 10, 11 o'clock at night, it's not that busy. I can't imagine that the impact would be that significant if we were asked them to turn off the sign from 11 to 5:30.
Thank you.
Two things. I've seen, we do this all over the country, so I've seen municipalities define 12 to 4 in other municipalities, and that seemed to work. However, I'd like to provide some context to facts and how far lights cast. And the standard automobile low beam headlight shines 200 feet in front of them. In this case, we're referring to a home that is 400 feet to the side of of First Street, of a sign that is going to be facing north and south on First Street. So I would ask the resident, is it the sign that is the concern, or is it the parking lot lighting that is the concern? Because there is no possible way that a light emitting diode, something that is meant to glow, will cast a light farther than a beam of incandescent light on a car. So if that car was parked at that sign, it can only go 200 feet. The LED, which is not meant to cast light, it's only meant to glow, will not go anywhere near that. So and those are facts.
So in layman's terms, are you saying that basically the light from the sign cannot be what's impacting him at night?
It can't. The light from these parking lot lights or street lights maybe, yes. But to think that the light from the sign is going to cast farther than a headlight on a car is impossible.
So I don't know if maybe this is because of the intensity that the sign is set. Because I don't remember having, I don't remember what the numbers were on this one, but every time we have a sign, a digital sign that comes up, well, obviously not every time, but we had a commissioner that would bring up often the Toyota sign on Sycamore Road. And as you're coming down much further than even 400 feet away, that sign is really bright and just like it grabs your eye and kind of takes you to right where that sign is. And so I can in that case, and it might be because they've got the brightness, the intensity is too high, whatever. So I get what Mr. Gerlach has been bringing up in that case. So I think in respect for that possibility, that would be something that, obviously we're taking into consideration. I get that, most signs probably are, 250, 200. When you go by DeKalb High School, that doesn't grab you and it doesn't shine that far, it doesn't appear. Some of it probably is the color that is being used, where that's the more amber orange light, I think is what they've got on that one.
Right.
So that intensity isn't so bright, but that Toyota sign out on Sycamore Road is really bright and really intense.
And they've probably controlled that intentionally.
Right.
Because and again, with respect to the concern for this, signage by nature is intended to be an attention-getting device. That's why it's there, to attract your attention to it. In the early 2000s, the United States did a lot of R&D, research and development, on these electronic message center units, because cities across the country were saying, we don't want them, they're too distracting. So what they did was they did all of the research or all the development, the whole 9 yards, and found that there was never one documented case of any car accident from a sign, and that it was deemed not more distracting than the waving of an American flag in the wind. So to that end, and with respect to the fact that signs are meant to be an attention-getting device, the concern today is brilliancy of light, and the fact is that the brilliancy of the light of this sign in question cannot extend that far.
And I will admit, I like to see the information on the signs. When I'm going by Clinton Rosette currently, I can't read what's on that sign until I'm right there, and just because of my vision. But when I come up on a sign like Hillcrest Covenant, I can see that a little bit further, and I'm not distracted to stop and turn my head necessarily to look to try and read what that sign says.
The intention, right?
Which, right. I know when we were discussing, when First Midwest Bank had put their sign up and we were going through this discussion, that was a concern of, you're going through that stoplight and people are going to stop and gawk at what that sign is saying. Was that going to be something that was going to be of concern? And as you've said, I haven't seen an accident at that intersection. But they also, their sign is a little smaller and not as bright either. So I think, there's a lot of pieces to take into consideration,
Agreed.
Obviously, as we're doing, and I think this discussion is very good. So I appreciate what you've given us.
My opinion would be, just for consistency, is that turning it off is not the solution, because again, part of the idea is that you want people to watch this, and when they're driving by, you want them to pay attention to it, because that's the form of information. And so there's some consistency, I think, that needs to take place here. And again, if the intensity is down below where it is even now, with all due respect, even if we were to shut this off at 11 o'clock at night until 5:30 in the morning, or 12 o'clock at night until 5:30 in the morning, are you truly staring out your window at 3 o'clock in the morning and are bothered by what's there now?
Depends on
how I'm sleeping that day.
I guess.
True. I think the interesting piece for me in this discussion is we've got one resident here in an area where we've got an apartment building and probably, 8 other houses west of you, southwest of you, or whatever. We have one resident here that is concerned and expressing concern. So,
We also had someone submit a letter too.
right. But you would think that if this was a bigger issue or a broader issue, there'd be more people here because there's people there. So that boggles my mind a little bit too as we're thinking about this. But and I don't know if we need to also consider color. And I just want to bring that really quickly.
I don't mean to extend this any further, but I mean, we are also commissioners and citizens of the city of DeKalb, and in that sense, our opinion as representatives also count. And I like the idea of having less light pollution. And I'm not going to go into the discussion of whether this gentleman is bothered by the light in the parking lot versus the sign. Entirely possible. I couldn't care less. I'm not going to go into that argument. The main argument here is that if I can minimize light at night, I will vote for it.
And it
I mean,
can
for
always
the
get
sake of
changed when it gets to council too. Yeah.
Correct. I mean, for the sake of safety, it's fine to have lights in the parking lot, but this is not safety anymore.
It seems to me the 11 o'clock to 5:30 makes sense to at least dim it or whatever can be done during that period.
Would you like the motion again?
I think the situation where we find ourselves is that some of us may want to make an amendment to the sample motion. Is that correct, Mr. Becker?
Yes, it seems to amend it so that the sign be turned off from the hours of 11 PM to 5:30 AM.
I would agree to dimming it, but not turning it off. Again, I think that there's a consistency aspect with this.
So I like that idea. Do you have a suggestion on what dimming is?
Well, again, it's not going to emit any more light than the current sign that's there. As a matter of fact, he's already testified to the fact that it'll be less than what's there now.
Okay.
But I do think that there's a consistency aspect of people paying attention to it, whether it even be that late at night. But we're not adding anything, we're not changing anything from what's existing now.
The only concern with dimming versus turning it off is we don't know what dimming means.
Well, again, he testified to the fact that it's less light than what's being admitted now by the
At
fluorescent
standard,
bulbs.
though, that's at standard. That's as is, it's less than what it is, so.
No, that is during the dim period, correct?
At night.
Yes.
At night, it's less, but it's at or less than what the current sign is.
Well, the current sign's, turns off during the day.
It's not.
Oh, I see, okay.
But if we're going to dim it, we have to say like 250 nits.
Has to be some
Is
standard.
basically what
so-
you're saying, right?
Mhm.
You need a number.
Well, we got to enforce it. Just saying dimmer, how do we know it's the amount
What's
that you're looking
effective?
for? Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so what we would have to establish is what the current one is, or you would have to take an educated guess. Correct? I mean, that's the only way we're going to know what the current one is, because again, what I understand is not wanting to do is cast any more light than being shown on the current sign right now. So we would have to understand that before we could actually assign a number to it. Am I
Could
wrong?
Continue it.
Yeah, if you feel it's warranted to,
Get the information and we could continue this. Right?
that's up to the commission. If you feel it's warranted to dim,
I
what's
did
been
reach out
testified, I think, is,
to someone that I thought
the
would
light will be
answer.
less, and it's true what Brandon had mentioned about it's not showing light outward. It's just, the sign is to be seen. It's not like a headlight of a car or this, what's more intense out there is probably the parking lot lighting and the street lighting.
I think
And this
that-
sign is 400 feet away, and it's quite a distance.
Correct.
So, the commission can do what you want, it's your recommendation, but in terms of, and you can continue, if you choose something, you need to be clear on what you're requesting, what information you're asking for.
And you
on that, so-
have been, that has been stated in the UAD already of no brighter than 500 nits. And the technology supports an auto dimming feature, and it's a light emitting diode. It is not casting light.
Yeah, so there's already standard recommended 500 nits.
In
I
your
would just
ordinance.
pass it as is with the understanding that we're going to
And
add.
500 nits is kind of an average level
Globally, yeah.
globally. So.
United States of America, I should say.
So it does dim, so there's a standard in there that may address kind of what you're looking for.
And that's already a
Perhaps.
condition of approval,
Right.
which it should be.
So would 500 nits be probably what we see at a gas station?
Yeah, that's the same standard as Toyota Bemis and Little John. That's 500 nits is what we've used in the last 3 approvals, so. And that's kind of a standard intensity, I think, for lighting.
If I could address several points. First, you asked why more people aren't here. The letter I got said I was getting it because I was a homeowner within a certain distance. Was it sent to homeowners or was it sent to residents?
Since to any property owner within 250 feet of the.
So the people in the
site.
apartments and the people renting houses would not have gotten it. So their input is not being considered. As far as Mr. Maxwell's point, yes, it might be dimmer, but it's changing. That will make it more distracting, that will make it more noticeable, that will draw the eye. As far as LEDs versus headlights, have you looked at a new car lately? The headlights are LEDs because they can throw brighter light farther with less juice than incandescent.
It's a completely different technology.
Okay. We're not going to get into that argument.
No.
So,
I also just want to point out, too, that I think we did set precedent when we passed the one for the church. So
The precedent being what? I'm sorry, I wasn't on the commission.
they were, that
They were
condition was not,
Unrestricted?
There's no time restriction on that.
All right.
I mean, I think that's a great courtesy, but we did pass it with that restriction, and that is also in a residential neighborhood.
Mr. Gerlach, I'm going to make the motion to accept it as is. I'd like to recommend that when it goes to city council for the final hearing, that you attend and bring neighbors. They will ultimately set any constraints on time. At this point, I think we're all in agreement that the sign's a good idea. But with due respect, I do think that at this point, your concern over how it impacts you, I would encourage you to have your neighbors attend the city council meeting. And maybe at that point in time, they'll make a decision whether or not to require it be turned off. So, that being stated, I would move the Planning and Zoning Commission forward its findings of fact and recommend to the City Council approval of special use permit for the property located at 650 North First Street, Clinton Rosette Middle School, in order to approve a waiver to Article 13.03.9 of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow an electronic changeable copy sign, digital display sign, as shown on the sign detailed 9/18/19 prepared by Aurora Sign Company and located as shown on the aerial photo received 10/8/19, both labeled as Exhibit A and per the conditions as indicated on Exhibit B.
Second.
motion's been made by Becker, second by Maxwell. Any discussion? And I do want to mention in regard to Mr. Becker's comment about the city council, we're approving the special use permit. The city council will then ultimately approve the further aspects of this, so I do want to mention that. Roll call.
Becker,
Yes.
Buckley, Castro,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Maxwell,
Yes.
Wright, Chair Doe.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. The second item is a public hearing, a petition by DeKalb Harlem LLC for rezoning from the GC General Commercial District to the PDC, Planned Development Commercial District, for a 7.26 acre site to allow for a video gaming establishment to locate in an approximate 2,000 square foot tenant space. The petition also requests allowance of the proposed video gaming establishment to be located within 500 feet of another video gaming establishment. The subject tenant space is located at 1704 Sycamore Road and generally located at the northeast corner of Sycamore Road and East Dresser Road. And I open to the petitioners. If you could state your name and address, please.
Tim Muldowney, apologies. Tim Muldowney here on behalf of petitioner. Address 7791 Joy Lane, Roscoe, Illinois, 61073. I'm trying to be rather brief, but I just want to go over just kind of a quick overview of the property, which you kind of already did, but I just kind of want to discuss the property a little bit and then go over the history of this particular site, the actual premises, the 2,000 square foot premises, and what we've been dealing with there. And then I just want to address a couple of things in the staff report just to clear up a couple things. So first off, as you can see, we're at 1700 or 1704 is the exact address, Sycamore Road. This is the DeKalb Shopping Center. The entire site is actually what is before you for this petition. However, the subject matter is actually more focused on, if you look up there where the arrow is pointed, that smaller section that's white from the aerial. It's a 2,000 square foot approximately area of about a 90,000, maybe 100,000 square foot shopping center. So we're talking about a rather small portion of the shopping center, but nonetheless. I also want to point out, which is one of the reasons that we're here, this shows you where the other gaming parlor or other gaming establishment is located. And as you're aware, it's within that 500-foot threshold, not by a lot, but unfortunately it's on the wrong side of it. However, we do feel that the fact that this site that we're discussing, the 2,000 square foot area, the fact that that is kind of set right smack dab in the middle of this large 100,000 square foot shopping center, the fact that this is a main commercial corridor, there's many uses between these two users. We think that, or at least we're hoping that helps our case a bit in this situation. We hope you consider that fact. We also, the fact that there's, the parking lot, there's multiple outlots. The other gaming, there's an outlet. This is more in line of further back from the road. So we think that hopefully should help. Going over the history of this space, this particular space in the shopping center, the 2,000 square foot space, has been vacant since 2008. So we're now at 11 years and growing with regard to this just kind of being wasted space, just sitting there, not generating revenue, and essentially just sitting there being dead space. In 2016, we had a glimmer of hope. We had a user, someone came and signed a lease for this site to be used as a licensed gaming establishment. They were able to obtain local approvals to move forward on that. Then they were to move forward and apply for state approvals. Part of that, they were so committed to it that there was already, they had already performed a full build out of that space. But unfortunately, for reasons unrelated to this site in particular, they were not able to get, the actual user was not able to get their license from the state. So then we were set back, and now, once again, we're sitting with a space that now is built out, but being unused without a viable tenant. I'm just quickly going to show you a little bit of the build out. It is very specifically built out for a gaming parlor. There is a small bar area in the front, but very minimal, about 500 to 600 square feet. And as you can see, completely unused. This is the area where the terminals would go, so it's very specifically built out for this type of use. So with that said, it's ready to go. Right now, we do have an interested party. A lease is not signed. However, I'm kind of putting the horse before the cart. The zoning before you today is necessary for them to even move forward to use that space. So that's why we're here today. We're hoping we have a signed lease soon. We're still kind of in a negotiation phase, but we're optimistic. And again, like I said, the build-out is completed, and it's essentially already been okayed by the state. Like I said before, this location the state didn't have issues with this location in particular. It was the user that was going to be there before. So in this case, we're hoping that we can really hit the ground running if all the approvals are granted today and we can move forward with local approvals. We're hoping that, even this week yet, we could have the actual user apply for the gaming license and the liquor license with the city. So with that said, we're hoping we can hit the ground running. I do want to just address a couple things that are in the staff report briefly, just one for clarification and a couple points I want to make. First, it does mention that the user would be operating under the name Lacey's Place. It's my understanding that that is most likely not the case. They will be an independent party. I think Lacey's Place was tied to the previous user, so that it would be a name. We don't know that name in particular yet, but it will most likely not be Lacey's Place. So I just want to clarify that. Also, I want to address the hours restriction that is not necessarily recommended in the staff report, but it's mentioned. And it also states that we were not going to object to the hour restriction, which was originally the case. Unfortunately, since the staff report has come out, we've learned a little bit more about the state regulations, the state law, that that gaming cannot occur when liquor sales are not permitted. So essentially, having an hours restriction on the hours that liquor can be served would essentially be a restriction on the hours of the entire operation, because essentially they can't perform their main function, which is the gaming terminals, without having the liquor be available at those times. So we would be requesting that, other than the restrictions that are on the general liquor license, we would ask that there not be any hour conditions on this zoning hearing or this zoning request. Also, just as far as any concerns with regard to liquor in particular goes for this type of space, liquor sales are not really a huge driving force behind these types of users. It's really people want to go and use the terminals, especially liquor being sold before 10 a.m. Very minimal. You're more likely to go into one of these establishments before 10 a.m. and see someone with a Starbucks coffee at one of the terminals than you are to see someone with a Bud Light. So we hope that that's considered, that the liquor sales, especially before 10 a.m., should not be a real big concern. Even in the evenings when people do go out to establishments to drink and have multiple drinks, this isn't the type of place where that would happen. As I before, I think there was a floor plan. And I mentioned the size of the bar area. What you can see here is the bar area, again, about 500 to 600 square feet, and about a third of that, maybe more, is behind the bar area. There's not a lot of seating where people are actually going to be sitting and consuming multiple drinks. It's really, the focus is for people to use the back area with the terminal machines and enjoy a beverage or two. But really, as far as concerns with over-serving or having people overindulge, especially in the morning, that's very, very minimal with this type of use. It's not a driving force. People don't go to these to drink. They go to sports bars or other types of bars, places like that, rather than here. It's not, more social venues. So the other item I wanted to address with regard to the staff report was the signage. It has to do with the wall signage. It says that there wouldn't be a reference to gaming or slots or something along those lines. We do not know the particular user is going to be yet, as far as what their trade name is going to be. We don't know if they're going to be part of a franchise or not. But a lot of these types of users and the franchises, et cetera, may actually have the word slots as part of their trade dress, which is a pretty big deal. We don't want to jeopardize the working out this deal with the prospective tenant, so we want them to be able to use their trade dress. Additionally, if you look at where this location is from the road, if you're only able to advertise what your actual use is with window signage, it's going to be very difficult for people to actually see what's going on inside the center. not an outlot that has easy visibility from the road. It's set back in a very large inline center. It's 2,000 square foot space in a 90,000 square foot center. It's very easy to get lost back there, especially if you aren't able to actually advertise your traditional, your regular trade dress, or explaining, something slot, like Molly's slots, etc. Also, I want to point out that there currently isn't even pylon signage available for this user, so they're really going to have to rely on signage on the building. So that also is something to be considered. And while we do appreciate the ability to use some window signage, and I don't believe we have any objection to or restriction on window signage, as a landlord, we actually are rather strict with regard to our users in shopping centers and how much window signage they have, because generally we think wall signage gives a better aesthetic for a shopping center. We also generally have restrictions where we don't allow just big box signs and things like that. We tend to want individualized lettering, things along those lines. So, we really do take pride in what we're going to, try and develop here as far as a shopping center and what it looks like. So we would prefer to have the actual wall signage be the main advertisement than window signage with, slots written across it or something like that. So with that said, I think that covers pretty much what I wanted to address in the staff report and what I was going to present to you today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I open to the city.
Thank you, Chair. In the staff report, the applicant won't repeat a lot of things, but basically the current zoning is general commercial, and special use is required in the GC for video gaming establishment. Back in 2017 in March, we amended the ordinance to require these standalone video gaming cafes to be a special use in the commercial district. And this Lacey's Place did have, as mentioned, a license before that time. They never opened, actually, and their license expired in 2018. One of the requirements in the 2017 amendment was there be a separation of 500 feet between video gaming establishments. So this location was established before that. They got the license, and they're within about 465 feet away from, shown earlier, from Charlie's to the north there. So they're a little bit under that 500 feet. So they had a request of rezoning instead of special use. The special use we can't grant variances to. So this is a rezoning to plan development where we can accommodate waivers or a variance. So that's why they're rezoning to the plan development commercial district. So the applicant gave the history of the background of the site. Earlier, if you recall, earlier this summer, we did have a petition by a different operator trying to open this location. We did have a hearing set. We never went forward because they didn't get the final, all the approvals from the building owner, which is DeKalb Harlem LLC, who Tim represents. So this is the building owner getting the license, the zoning approval, and they're choosing an operator to run the actual video gaming. They're going to rezone, proposing to rezone the whole site, 7.2 acres of it instead of just the tenant space. Back in May of this year, the council did approve an amendment to the municipal code to increase the number of liquor licenses for video gaming establishments. Again, these are standalone video gaming cafes to 10, so this would be one of the 10 that would be allowed. So there was an ordinance approving this. They had conditions that they had to get the zoning approval for it and get their final liquor license through the state and through the city. In terms of the hours, so under the current liquor code for this type of use, the hours are listed there in the staff report, 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. Monday through Wednesday, 6 a.m. to 2 a.m., Thursday through Saturday, and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. And as mentioned, if you recall, with Maisie's and South 4th Street a few years ago, there was a condition that they couldn't sell liquor until 10 a.m., although they could operate the video gaming starting at 6. That was to kind of, there were some, to appease the concerns, I think, of some people that spoke at the hearing regarding the proximity to the school and the daycare center. That was a condition that the commission added at that time. We did that with the one on East Hillcrest too, earlier this year. What we've learned is true. We checked with our city attorney, and there's a copy of the statute in front of you, that the hours of the video gaming and the liquor have to coincide. You can't have the video gaming operating at different times than the liquor. Anytime the video gaming is open, you got to have the liquor available for sale. So if there's any restrictions on the timing, which are not agreed to, they want to stick to the liquor license hours, they would have to coincide. Regarding the signage too, as discussed, start with the Macy's, we did have restrictions on the wall sign in terms of language, lettering regarding any gambling or liquor sales not allowed, and also restrictions on the window signage, and then the temporary signs, any temporary banner or anything they do choose to put up can't have that information on there either. So in that case, of course, they were right up along the street, and there was testimony at the hearing that a lot of people walking around that area, so that was kind of a condition too, to kind of limit the advertising of gambling going on there. The wall sign does have no lettering on that. They do have dice in it, so there is, does show that. And the one on East Hillcrest, they haven't opened yet. They haven't got their state license yet, so they haven't even opened yet, but they have the same restriction. So the applicants indicated here they would agree to the window signage and the temporary, but with the wall signs, particularly a good point is this tenant is way back off Sycamore Road, quite a distance, a small tenant frontage. There's no area on the pylon sign allowed for the advertising, so it's key that they advertise as much as possible off their wall sign. So I didn't add these to the sample motion. I just want to bring up the history, so if the commission wants to make any of these a part of your motion, you'll need to do that regarding the signs or the hours, with that thought in mind that the hour restriction, we can't separate the liquor sales from the video gaming operations. So we have the standards for rezoning here, which they're recommending they comply with at this location. Also with the plan development standards they're meeting, we're recommending. We did get a couple of citizen response comment forms. One from Cynthia Dolder, 1407 East Dresser Road, indicating support of the proposal. And then one from Susan Amat of 1730 Sunrise Drive, mentioning she does not support the proposal. Copies of both of those are provided to you. One thing I note too, which we did on the last few video gaming establishments, we had the police department take a look at the calls sheet, calls they get in regarding these standalone video gaming, and we did that again in June. Although the hearing didn't get to this point. Police chief reviewed those, indicated that there's no significant demand for public safety resources, nor any quality of life issues with these video games. They're pretty docile. There's not a whole lot of activity going on at them. Certainly no criminal activity occurring there. So, so we'd recommend approval in the sample motion. Again, I'm not including anything about signage or hours. If the commission wishes to do that, you need to make that part of your motion. And the sample motion is prepared. The conditions we do have are the establishment would be allowed to operate in the tenant space as shown on the aerial image and the floor plan that was provided. They have to obtain the liquor license per the ordinance that was approved earlier this year, meet those requirements. It allows the waiver variance to the 500-foot setback, so to Charlie's, which is about 465 feet away. And then since we're rezoning the whole area, the DeKalb Shopping Center there to PDC, if there's any other regulations that don't fall under the PDC, they would refer back to general commercial district in terms of uses, other signage that goes up, so it's kind of clear of the GC would cover still all the other areas that would go on with this development beyond this video gaming establishment. So that's all. Thanks, Chair.
I'm sorry, before we go any further.
Sure.
Can you say that last bit again?
Yeah, so the standards for this, it's currently zoned general commercial, so once you zone it to planned development commercial, they've got to have some standards for that. And the UDO, the PDC has limited, it doesn't have like a list of permitted and special uses. There's some things that aren't quite in there, so what I'm saying here is if there's not something covered in the PDC regs, it falls to the general commercial district regulations.
So then it would fall back to
The GC for like
For that
permitted and special
specific
uses for other tenant spaces
area.
as they're coming in, so.
Okay.
Once we change the PDC, we got to kind of cover ourselves a little bit in other standards, so.
Okay. Thank you. It's a public hearing, so I do have to open the public hearing, which I am doing now. However, I'm noting there's no public here, except for us, we count. So can I close the public hearing immediately?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm closing the public hearing. Okay, commissioners, and I'll start with Mr. Becker.
Okay, I have actually several questions. The first one is, it's a standalone location. However, do I not recall that Mardi Gras Lanes also has slot machines?
Yeah, there's a little difference. There's a chart in front of you, list all the video gaming operations. So the city does break it down in video gaming cafes. Or these are the standalone operations. They're in the brown color there. These are the operations where the video gaming is a primary use there.
Okay.
And we have a definition in our UDO of how that's established. So like Mardi Gras Lanes, the video gaming is accessory to the main operation of bowling.
Sure. As a comment, it seems interesting to me that with the standalone and a bowling alley, where's the benefit to the community of adding another independent gaming system in that close of proximity to one another? So it brings on my question. My first question is, has there been any sort of economic forecast on what they believe the potential revenue first through fifth year would be generated, and how much of that they believe is new revenue versus what's just being drawn from other establishments?
Unfortunately, I actually don't know that because we're here before you as the landlord, so I don't know what analysis they've done. My hope is that they've done their due diligence in knowing whether this would be a viable site. And again, I do know that originally in 2016, I don't know how long Mardi Gras Lanes has had the gaming machines, and I also know that one thing sometimes it draws a different kind of customer. Mardi Gras Lanes may have the person who goes to bowl, and then it's an incidental use. So, you go with 4 people or 5 people and someone doesn't like bowling, so then they're using the machines, and that's a way for Mardi Gras Lanes to make additional revenue, whereas it's not serving the person who likes to go to their parlor. They have their spot that they like to go and sit. They get to know it's kind of a different target audience. I also note that the Charlie's, I believe it is, one thing I wanted to note is they do actually have pylon signage, so relating back to this signage issue, they kind of have an advantage with that, but they seem to have their own little shtick, and they seem kind of more like a bar than just a parlor as well, because it's like something something that I noted that it kind of advertised more as a bar with slots as well. So, they all kind of serve their own little niche, if you will. But as far as the Mardi Gras Lanes, and I wasn't aware they had the gaming machines in there, but I know that, there are also sometimes gas stations that put in these, and, it just kind of, they're filling a gap with these kind of places. It's larger restaurants that put in the gaming machines because they already have a liquor license. They're kind of padding their profit with those types of things. But as far as the people who are looking for a parlor in particular, they would go to a place like we're presenting rather than a place like Mardi Gras Lanes to do that.
Has your prospective client told you how many games they intend to put in?
There would be 5, and that's per state law. There cannot exceed 5. And that's actually how the build-out specifically was made. If you saw, when I showed it earlier, I can show it again. They already have the spots, and I don't know if it's exactly 5 there, but they already kind of have the cubbies where the terminals go. So the layout is already even established for those. But 5 is the maximum that anyone can have. So that's also another thing. Whereas, it's not like you have one large, store, one large establishment that comes in with 10 or 15 terminals. They're all limited to 5. So when you have a commercial corridor where a lot of commercial uses are focused and concentrated, it may be typical to see several of these because there may be a need for not a need, but a demand for maybe 20 terminals in a given area, and that would end up being 4 different establishments with 5 terminals.
And forgive me my ignorance on this, but in the state of Indiana, which is where I'm originally from, if a bar that had a liquor license did not serve food, they allowed smoking. In the state of Illinois, they could smoke in a bar as long as they weren't serving food. They could even have pub snacks. In the state of Illinois, could a facility like this actually allow smoking?
No,
So there'd be no smoking at all?
there's no smoking in public places in Illinois,
Okay.
no matter what it is, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yep, and the background on the Commissioner Becker's question about the other video gaming, the council has approved up to 10 standalone video gaming license. They would be the 10th, so in terms of the compatibility or the amount of revenue coming in, if there's room, so to speak, for another one, that's not one of the findings of the commission. It's more of, is this location appropriate based on that? So, but looking at the revenue, you can get that off the state's very transparent. The video gaming share from January to October this year compared to last year has gone up slightly, so there's still additional video gaming revenues coming in. But that's not something we ask an applicant to show that, there's enough, that's due diligence they have to do. We don't require them to come forward and say, yes, there's enough. Like with any other type of business, we don't ask them, to submit a market study to validate that they're can come into the market and there's room for them. So just a kind of a background on that. So the findings don't really address that issue. They weren't required to submit a pro forma or any type of economic development statement. So it's more of a number of licenses that kind of the council sets, and then the commission, we're kind of looking at the specific location, if it's appropriate, does it meet the findings or doesn't it meet the findings?
Good, thank you.
So I think in a way the council has resolved some of this problem by putting this limitation on 10 establishments that are standalone in the city of DeKalb. Is that correct? Or at least,
Yeah.
not my opinion, but the statement about the limitation on 10.
Yes,
correct?
yeah.
Could you remind me, the state law limits 5 units per establishment regardless of whether it is standalone or not, correct?
Actually,
Or
they
no?
changed that to, with all the changes in the gambling this summer, they increased it to 6. In the city of DeKalb, we did amend our ordinance to allow up to 6 machines too. So you don't have to have that many, but 6 is the max.
So 6 is the max regardless of whether it's a standalone or not?
Right.
Okay.
My apologies for being wrong on that. I didn't know it was 6.
Well, I learned something new there. Yeah, very good. Thank you. I don't have any more questions, comments. Thanks.
No, I really don't have any questions.
My only confusion is if that we grant the license, how is that transferable to the tenant?
Yeah, you're just granting zoning approval, you're not granting a license. So
Oh, that's
that would
true.
be through the video gaming license and liquor license. They'll have to show the operator on there.
Correct,
Yeah.
that was, I was saying earlier, we're hoping still to get the operator to apply for the liquor license and the gaming
Gotcha.
license,
Yeah.
yet this week even, and that would be personal, that would be theirs, that would be their license, we're just the landlord, but this is a zoning
Yeah,
request.
especially used for the location, not for the actual
Yeah.
operator.
And the only other question I had too was regarding the signage. I was unaware that you can't have video gaming in the exterior signage per our code.
That's not per our code. There was a condition that was added with Macy's on South 4th Street a few years
Gotcha.
ago. Additional condition that was added because of the concern of the proximity of the school. We had a
So that was just
daycare center
specific to
there.
Macy's.
Yeah, then we carried that over, and we did have a few people too at the one on East Hillcrest. A few of you were on the commission at the time. Did have a concern, so we were consistent there and carried it there. The applicant agreed. Because we
Gotcha.
did the hours, so this one, I haven't been making the sample motion, I just brought it up,
Yeah.
as what
Okay.
you've done in the past, so if you feel it's warranted here or not, they have a concern because it's, they haven't
Legitimate.
chosen operator yet, sometimes they do have that in part of their name, not all the time, and particularly since they're in a space that's pretty far back from Sycamore Road compared
Yeah.
to the others, which were, one of East Hillcrest are right up front by the main roadway, so
Okay.
pretty easily seen.
Okay. I have no questions either.
Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions or comments? If not, I'd be happy to take a motion.
Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Otherwise, I would read it. Hang on one second. What page was it on? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
What page was it on, or do you have it, Ron?
Yeah, I have it here. You want to?
Sure.
Read it?
Based on the submitted petition and testimony presented, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward its findings of fact and recommend that the City Council approve of a rezoning from General Commercial District to PDC Planned Development Commercial District for the subject site located at 1704 Sycamore Road to allow for video gaming establishment per the conditions and standards listed in Exhibit A.
Motion made by Maxwell,
Second.
second by Klein. Any discussion? Roll call?
Castro?
Yes.
Klein?
Yes.
Maxwell?
Yes.
Wright? Becker?
Yes.
Buckley? Chair Doe?
No.
Motion passes.
Reports.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next meeting will be canceled, November 20th. The council is actually going to meet that night. They're going through a budget workshop on a couple nights that week, so they needed that Wednesday night for their second meeting, so that will be canceled. I'll send out the cancellation notice a week before for that. So our next meeting will be December 4th. Looks like we'll have one hearing for Walgreens. They want to Sprint, which is located inside there. They have a little substation, whatever. They want to put a 10-foot tall cell tower, antenna, not a tower, on top of the building or the side of the building. Per UDO, that requires a special use. So that's the one hearing we do have. That will be sent out or posted probably by the end of the week, and Commissioner will be sent a copy once that's posted. Past council meeting, October 28th, just to note, the council did approve on first and second reading the Chicago West Business Center amendments, project south of 88 and Gerla Road. And also, on first reading, approved the adult cannabis amendments that the commission did review also. Second reading will be at the next meeting, which will be next Tuesday night. We're closed on Monday for Veterans Day, so the council meeting will be Tuesday night. And then the medical cannabis dispensary, you recommended approval at 700 Peace Road. That's going to the council on November 25th for review. That's all. Thanks.
So, and this might be putting you on the spot, do you know at this moment if we're going to have our December 18th meeting?
I do not know at this time.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there,
I was just curious, given that it's
attendance-wise, any, let me know if there's.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be here.
close to the holidays, yeah.
What's the current, I'm sorry,
You might be asking the same question I'm going to. Go ahead.
when are we moving?
That was going to be my question, too. Is there an
Yeah, beginning of the
estimated-
year. I don't know the exact date, but it should be at the beginning of the year, so.
Okay.
And then, as I mentioned, I think before, once we move to the new location, our meetings will be held at the DeKalb Library
On Mondays.
on Mondays.
Will we still go with the same time, starting at 6?
Yes, 6 p.m.
Okay.
So any hearings coming up that are petitions submitted and they have a hearing set for January, then we'll schedule those for the new location, so.
Okay. And we'll get further information about the date that we're definitely there and where we need
Yes.
to go and all that information, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
We'll get that nailed down. Should start at the beginning of the year with the Mondays. It's going to be the Monday opposite the council meetings, but if there's some difference there in terms of what date we're actually starting meeting over there, we'll certainly let you know.
Okay. I think probably what I'll do is I'll coincide the dates with you and then get the dates out to the commissioner, so
Yeah.
everybody's got the dates.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll communicate that out.
Okay, wonderful. I don't have anything else, so I'd be happy to take a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
So moved by Maxwell,
Second.
second by Castro. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.